A or B?
I never thought about being a girl or a black person before I moved to London.
Left or right?
Ideas are 10 a penny and I'm happy to give them away because no one's going to do it like me.
Yes or no?
Even though it looks like I'm making a snap decision, I'm not.
Welcome to The Art of Deciding with Bruce Whitfield.
Hello, and welcome to The Art of Deciding, the podcast where we ask people who spend their lives making big decisions to tell us a little about how they do it. What do they base those decisions on? How do they make the difficult ones? What happens if they get it wrong? I'm Bruce Whitfield. I'm a journalist and I speak to and analyse decision makers for a living. The internet tells us we all make about 35,000 decisions every day. I'm hoping that listening to our decision makers in this series talk about the way they do it will make some of your choices just feel a bit easier.
I'm in love with the world, so it's not hard for me to be nice to people. I need to not be perceived as an angry black woman in order to just be able to exist as a baseline.
Sharmadean Reid is one of the UK's most successful and innovative entrepreneurs. At 24, she founded Wah Nails, a revolutionary web-based business that made its way to Oxford Street with the likes of Serena Williams and Margot Robbie as clients. Then, she got frustrated at the lack of tech solutions in beauty booking, so she created Beauty Stack, a site that used images to sell manicures. In the process, she raised £1 million worth of venture capital, the first black woman to do that in the UK. As Beauty Stack took shape, she realised businesses on it were mainly female-run, and there was no support network for them, which inspired her to create Stack World, designed to give female entrepreneurs a place to get together, share knowledge, and give each other the backup they need. Her journey from art school into business, tech innovation, and now to her focus on her vision of gender equity involved a lot of decisions. One of the most recent was to write a book, New Methods for Women, 49 essays drawing on her own experience to help women do better in business and in life. It was initially inspired by a time when those decisions weren't doing her any good.
It was my method of coping with certain stresses and anxieties that were happening in my mid-20s to mid-30s, late 30s. I was always confident and I always knew I could do what I wanted and told I could be whoever I wanted. But the more that I started to forge my own path, I realised that there were all of these different barriers in my way that were either systemic or self-made. So systemic would mean just general patriarchy. Like I moved to London and suddenly realised I'm not in Wolverhampton anymore. I am a tiny little fish and actually I'm at the bottom of the social strata as a black woman. And that was interesting for me to kind of naively come up against. I never thought about being a girl or a black person before I moved to London, ever. I just did whatever I wanted. I never had anyone telling me otherwise. And then self is because, the way we grow up and the things that we hold below the surface in terms of childhood traumas or negative self-beliefs, even if you push them down, the more you come up against these systemic barriers, the more emotionally vulnerable you are to anything that's not been dealt with rising to the surface. So I, flung myself into business at 24. I had a baby at 26. And by 28, I was just having panic attacks quite regularly. But I didn't know what they were. I was just getting these incredible chest pains. And I was like, oh, my chest is hurting again. I wonder what that might be. And then one day it was so bad, I called an ambulance. And the doctor, she said, are you stressed? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, your body is. And that's when I thought, the kind of rational, intelligent person in me was like, well, if my body's doing this, then I need to make a change. I need to try something new. And that's when I began thinking about new methods.
And you talk very clearly in the book about how a lot of people say, I trust my gut. But yes, you trust your gut and you trust your heart and you trust your throat. There are different sensations that come through for you. And you know that you're on the right path or the wrong path, and it actually aids you in your decision-making process.
Yeah, I would say a big part of the book is constantly asking yourself, is this right for me?
Yeah.
And where can I hear or feel the right way or get the data to help me? In every essay, I'm trying to say to people, is this really what you want? Or is this what you think you want based on what society has kind of carved out for you? And if it's what you definitely want, what can you do to ensure that you have reflected and scenario planned and mapped out what this move is going to do and how it's going to impact you and affect you, so that you're kind of not going through life blind? So I zoom out at everything from birth to death, and I kind of slice up my life, and I think, okay, so I made this decision, I'm doing that. When I'm 50, I'm going to be doing this. When I'm 60, I'm going to be doing this. And it means that every micro decision I make today is helping me towards that longer term goal. So some decisions might look bad to the outside world, but they don't know what the grand vision is for your life. Only you know that. So as long as you're comfortable with the decisions that you're making and you know why you're making them, I think it's personal and private to you why you do the things that you do.
So, zooming out, looking at the complete picture of your life and making decisions accordingly. It's an interesting way of thinking about the choices on offer. Is it a method we could all do well to adopt? To make sure, as Sharmadean says, we don't go through life blind. Whatever you think of her approach to life planning, Sharmadean Reid has obviously got something right with the decisions she's made in business. Is that process something she keeps to herself, or does she involve the people around her?
I'm very inclusive in a slightly lazy way. Why shoulder all the responsibility of figuring out the solution when you actually should involve the people who are going to be consuming the solution? I'm always surprised when people launch things, but they haven't spoken to anyone who's going to use it. And you'd be surprised how many businesses are built like this. Even yesterday, I had a call with a fledgling female founder who wanted to start a startup. And when she told me her idea, I said, oh, that sounds cool. So how many people have you spoke to who experienced the problem? How many people have you connected manually before you build a tech solution for it? Have you done, even a basic survey or insights? And the answer was no, no, no. And that to me is like really odd. I just can't imagine putting something out in the world without de-risking it by testing and asking the people who are going to be buying it.
And it's such an important distinction to make because you're not going shoo-wah all-inclusive. This is a strategic decision. This is, I think it's a good idea. I would love this idea in my life. Let me see if 100 other people would like it in their lives, and perhaps then we've got a model we can test.
Precisely. And also as well, I start talking about my ideas the minute I have them to everyone and anyone, because every single reaction, you're getting a tiny bit of data on whether that idea is resonating or not. I'm thinking about an idea right now. So I went to a department store and spoke to some girls on the shop floor. I said, what's doing well in this category right now? Why do you think that is? I'm asking questions over and over and over again, just to understand and ascertain, like, am I on the right track?
When you ask those questions and when you are spitballing ideas, are you at all wary of giving away IP? A lot of people hold things close to themselves because they believe they've got this great idea and are terrified to share it because it'll get replicated in China in a week and then they'll be pushed out the market.
I to my detriment, maybe don't care about that. I just think ideas are 10 a penny and I'm happy to give them away. My dream job would be to sit like at a fairground, like a fortune teller. But instead of a fortune teller, I'm just saying, what are you into? I'll give you an idea for it. And I just write it down on a piece of paper and you give me some money for it and I hand it over. That would be a cool job. It's not really the idea or the branding or the website or the Instagram page. It really is the distribution, the monetization strategy, the partnerships. These are the things that build businesses with longevity, I think. And that is the secret sauce. It's that recipe of things that make something last. You know, we've got a huge community of women, like there's tens of thousands of them. And naturally, there are people with competing ideas. And one of the essays in my book is on dealing with competitors. And I said, actually, what you should look at is competitors prove that there's a market for your idea. So people copying you is a good thing. But what they can't copy is the unique recipe behind the scenes of the business of how you're going to scale. I don't mind if someone wants to take an idea because no one's going to do it like me.
You talk a lot about vision and mission, and I'm guessing into that comes values. And you actually map out that vision and that mission, and I get a sense of values that come through that as well as part of this process. And that seems to be instrumental in that no matter what you do, the how you do it will be the element that is consistent. It will be collaborative. It will be for the benefit of women. It will be in consultation with women. It will be to provide them solutions to issues they face. That is a constant theme through and likely to persist.
Yeah, I think these things are just in your DNA. You know, while you were talking then, I was like, where does that come from? But again, I think it's my upbringing. You know, I come from a big Jamaican family. I've got 150 cousins. Everything has to be collaborative. You've got no choice. Also, I grew up in the church. You know, my family are very Christian. We do a lot in the community. There's a natural service element to the way I was raised. Like, it wouldn't even occur to me to not be of service. So I think the way that I explain to people your vision, mission, values, your vision is really what you want the world to look like and what your life's work will be. So my vision will always be around gender equity. Your mission is the 3 to 5 year project, business, education that you're doing in order to execute on that new world happening. And then the values and principles are the guardrails by which you make those decisions, the parameters. And I always think that the way you find those words is, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? So when I'm not in the room, I want people to say that I'm authentic, that I'm creative, that I'm a thinker. These are my principles. And then that way, you just start living it in everything you do.
When was the last time you mulled over what people might say about you when you're not in the room? Have you ever considered it as something that might guide the decisions you make? I'll give you a moment to think about what those words might be. You have said one of the biggest barriers to starting something new is the fear of criticism. What has given you the confidence to withstand criticism, which is inevitable, regardless of whence it comes? It can at least scratch the surface and can be upsetting or at best distracting.
Well, I also say that when it comes to criticism, I always look for the kernel of truth. And even if I don't believe the criticism I'm receiving, what I will then look at is, well, why did this person say it? Really, the thing that they're criticizing might not be the work, it might be the way I am sharing it or the tone of voice in which I'm doing. Do you get what I mean?
Yes.
I think in terms of how I've managed to deal with it is, firstly, I don't actively seek negative comments. So when people put work out and then read every single review And I'm like, why would you do that to yourself? I'm like, what is the point? Like, these are strangers on the internet. Like, why do you care? The next thing I do, which I think is the most key, is identify who the work is for. Who is the art for? Who is the message for? If it works for that person or that group, then you've achieved your goal. I think all the time about when people criticize things, I'm like, well, it wasn't for you.
Yes.
You didn't like the food at this restaurant. This restaurant wasn't aimed at you. You didn't like this movie. This movie wasn't aimed at you. As I get older, I realize that everything that I've done, I have done and created because I wanted to see it exist. And I'm very lucky in that the things I wanted to see exist happened to resonate with other people. Like, I really wanted a nail salon for myself to get my nails done. And it just so happened that like thousands of other girls wanted it too. So I think if you are happy with your work, like, I'm working on my second book now and I'm writing a script, and I don't know if either of those are going to resonate or be picked up or be paid for, but they're so important to me and so important to my life's work that I am going to complete them no matter what. And the only person who needs to be satisfied with it is me.
Tell me about your worst decision. Tell me about the one thing that maybe you wish you didn't ever do. Or you did do and you're grateful you did because you learned most from it.
My worst decision ever was I'd been paid for a consultancy job and I asked to be paid the entire year up front. And surprisingly, the client said yes. And I decided to put that money into my nail salon instead of buying a house. And that is the worst decision I've ever made. Because had I bought a house when I was 20 something, I would have a property portfolio now that I could only dream of. So I would say that is my worst decision. And that is actually what my next book's about. It's about women and ownership. And I think maybe there was an element of people pleasing with that decision because I was putting the team, the customers, the company before myself and before my own needs at that point.
What would have happened if you'd not put the money into the nail salon and put it into the property? Yes, you'd have a property. Would you have ever had a nail salon? Would you have ever had the empire that it is formed?
Yes, because if you have property, you can easily leverage your property to have raised it, So these are the things you don't know when you're a kid who's grown up without anyone who's ever bought a house before. Do you know what I mean? It's like if I had someone, advising me, mentoring me, if I had those, as I write in the book, kindly middle-class parents telling me how to save for a deposit on a house, then maybe I would have known these things, but I didn't. But it's fine, because yes, it was a poor decision, but it's okay because I know better now and I can do it again.
Maybe your role is the first of many generations of people who will make better decisions based on the fact that you've done the learning and you're writing the books about it. Talk to me about how you undo or mitigate wrong decisions.
One of the best lessons I've ever learned is to just apologize as fast as possible. I don't understand why you would want to prolong a poor decision just for the sake of pride. If you can remove your pride and ego from a poor decision and hold your hands up and say, I got this wrong, it's like a relief. It's actually a really powerful weapon in your arsenal, especially when you're leading a team and you're making decisions fast and all the time. So yeah, I would say that the best thing to do when you've made a poor decision is to just own up to it. And depending on who your audience is, explain why and then move on. And also don't be a martyr and self-flagellate and go on about it. And this whole thing of cancel culture and self-flagellation, I'm just like, people make mistakes. They've been making mistakes from the beginning of time and they will continue to make mistakes. So let's just acknowledge it and move on. Yeah.
Does your collaborative approach mitigate decision failure?
To some extent, yes, but you can still always have blind spots. When I started the Stack World, we built an app where members have profiles. And in the profiles, there's 24 different data points on your name, your career choice, all of these different things. And I remember a member saying to me, you need to put pronouns on there. And I was like, I never really thought about it. Because you think you're being diverse, right? But actually, I'm around women 24/7. That's not diverse, is it? So she wrote this big, lengthy email, and she probably thought that she was rocking the boat and, it would cause an uproar. And I just replied saying, great idea. We'll put it in the next release. But I think this is obviously unique to a startup and unique to having a tiny business. Like when your business is small, you can move really fast. So I think it's easy for me to say that, but I do think even the biggest companies in the world should constantly be having community focus group listening.
Your best ever decision. What is it?
My best ever decision is leaving London and moving to Wolverhampton.
What has that done?
It's changed my entire vibe. My vibration is very high right now. I need to be around nature. I need to be around family. My nervous system is so much more relaxed. And in the last 4 days, I've written like 10,000 words, and I'm like on fire right now because I have the mental clarity and the time to be able to really put my ideas down on paper in a better way.
It's a very important decision brought upon, I suppose, from the physicality of your response to stress. And as you recharge 2.0, is there a clear vision? Is there a new blank piece of paper, or is it dusting off the old one and continuing on the mission that you set out for all those years ago, 2009?
So the things that I'm working on now still are working towards my vision of gender equity because, as I said, that's my life's work and always will be. And what I'm working on now is, instead of using my business skills, how do I use and tap into my creative self, which I feel that I had to suppress for the last 15 years in order to be an entrepreneur? What I am a big believer of in career decision making is trying to move into the space, the crack that only you can occupy. Lots of people, for example, could start a women's community. And yes, it might not be like mine, but whatever, they might have a better distribution strategy. So they could scale faster. But not many people have a background in creativity plus commerce. So I've got this real mix of experience, which allows me to write something that I think the way I want it to be, only I could write. Even saying that sounds so egotistical, but you have to think like that in order to bolster your confidence. I have to say that only I can do this, because if I don't say that, I would lose motivation to do it. I sit there and I look at the blank piece of page and I'm like, what is the story that only I could tell? Well, a very easy place to start is I was the first Black woman to raise venture capital over $1 million. So literally only I can tell that story in the UK, right? What is really interesting about that is it means I can draw on themes of being an outsider. It means I can draw on themes of being a Black woman in a very masculine white world. I also have an added layer of coming from a fashion and beauty background before entering tech. There's all of these different facets of the diamond, so to speak, that I can draw on. Each side is needs to be unique to you. And I think the more sides you have, the more that you should be the person making the thing.
How would you describe your decision-making process?
It's very methodical. It's very reflective. I will be thinking about something for a very long time before I act on it, even though it looks like I'm making a snap decision. I'm not. It's based on a lot of data points. not just from myself, but from other people or culture. And once I've made a decision, I really stick to it. I don't tend to go back or flip-flop.
Is it science or is it art?
What I say is the bit that feels like art is still data-driven. The bit that is your gut has been honed over millions of years of evolution to help you know what to do. So the things that feel woo-woo to me are actually based in data and science. You know, these humans have existed for hundreds of thousands of years before science, as we know it today, even existed. So there has to be an element of acknowledging that intuition is an evolutionary scientific principle.
Methodical, reflective and fast, with the understanding that even instinct is based on data. Sharmadean Reid's Art of Deciding. I think it's interesting that she started with all the drive and imagination she needed, but it was then only that over time she developed a real understanding of how to manage the balance between life and business, and how essential it is to get that right. But then she also had the courage and integrity to act on that understanding, both for her own sake and for the sake of finding new ways to achieve that vision of gender equity that she is so passionate about. And of course, having a vision is something she believes is essential to making decisions. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Art of Deciding, the podcast where we ask people who make big decisions to reveal a little of how they do it. You'll find us on all major podcast platforms, so please follow so that you don't miss an episode. We have some fascinating decision makers in this series, from one of the most commercially successful writers ever, Lee Child, who's the inventor of Jack Reacher, champion poker player Liv Bourrie, Lord Karen Billamoria, the founder of Cobra Beer, and others. I'm Bruce Whitfield. I talk to decision makers for a living. You can find out more about me on brucewhitfield.com. Till next time, goodbye.